Hello, and thanks for coming along to And We Have an Office Dog, the digital agency podcast where we talk to agency owner-directors and learn more about what makes them tick. From the things that make them similar to the things they'd rather have known sooner, where they've had success and where they've learned some hard lessons. All will be revealed with your host, Chris Simmons, the Agency Accelerator, and he'll be talking to a different awesome agency person in each episode, asking them 4 questions and seeing where the conversation takes us over the next 25 minutes. Okay, so let us begin. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, voiceover guy, and I'm really pleased to have Seb from Soba Private Label. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, man. How are you doing? It's great to be here.
Not too bad at all. Not too bad at all. First of all, Seb, just before we get into agency conversation, Private Label, it's not an adult club. It is an agency, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I wish it was an adult club. I think that could have been a better and more fruitful career path. But what it's like once you start an agency, you get in too deep to leave.
That's it. So Seb, give us a bit of an intro to yourself first of all. You know, how have you gotten into this industry? Where do you come from? What got you into agency?
Yeah, so I used to be an in-house marketer, and I was a career in-house marketer. Climbed all the way up to the top, head of marketing, teams, all of that kind of stuff. The thing is I'd always wanted to work at an agency, but I never could get a job at an agency because agency owners were like, well, not agency owners, but like hiring managers and stuff were like, well, agency life is really different to in-house life. You won't be able to handle it. If you do come in, you'll need to get, a huge pay cut based on your kind of what you're used to as a head of marketing, like all of that kind of thing. And making that transition was really, really hard. And then when my last job finished, my last head of marketing job, I just thought, I'm just going to do this. I've always wanted to work for an agency. I've never been able to get a foot in. So the best thing I can do at this point is build an agency and start an agency. And I think if I'd realized that, then an adult club might have been the way to go. And
tell us a bit about Soba. So why private label? I'm intrigued. I've had a little look at the site, but naturally the listeners may well not have done. So give us a bit of a rundown. What do you guys do and how's it all come about?
So Soba focuses on positioning and copy for agencies, right? Mm-hmm. When we were starting an agency, we being myself and Dan, my business partner, we knew that we wanted to work with agency owners because we'd been in-house marketers both ourselves for such a long time. We'd seen everything. We'd had pitches, we'd fired agencies, we'd worked with agencies, like all of that kind of stuff. And one of the things that we found that was really, really hard was working out which agencies were better than others when you had to go through a process of figuring out which ones you actually wanted to pitch to, wanted you to pitch to. And we knew there that we had a lot of that skill that could help people because we'd been on that front line so much. In terms of private label, there's a really long history and heritage of things like supermarket brands and stuff, private labeling goods and services. So if you think about like your Tesco or Asda branded like baked beans, for example, Dan's going to kill me for likening us to baked beans, but that's fine. We knew when we were going to agencies saying, we'll help you with your positioning, we'll help you with your copy, your advertising, and all of that kind of stuff. They wouldn't necessarily want to tell people that that's what they do. Yeah. Right. It's hard to be an agency who then uses what's effectively an ad agency to get more clients. And so private label for us was to sort of signify that we understand where that fits in the market and to signify that, it's okay that people don't want to talk about using us and that we're here to, have that support and be supportive, but we're not, without explicit permission, going to shout from the rooftops about all of the people that have worked with us.
Yeah, fair. And the thing is, I guess it's not easier. It's a bit easier to deliver to clients than necessarily to see inside yourself and do it for yourself. So there is a good use case and a good reason for a business like yours.
Thank you. Yeah, we hope so.
Well, I've spoken to hundreds of agency leaders, a couple of nearly 200 on this podcast, and I know that they wouldn't like to admit that they aren't good at positioning their own businesses. And half the time, I'm sorry, agency leaders who are listening to this, you don't really know what you sell because you're just good at doing the thing that you sell. So listening to people who are happy to help you and not take the credit, so to speak, are worth their weight in gold. So speak to them and work with them. So the agency is relatively new, roughly what, a yearish or so old.
Yeah,
What's
just about a year.
what's the biggest lesson do you think you've learned since you kicked off?
You don't start an agency, I think is the biggest lesson. No, it's funny you say that, because when we started and we were thinking, okay, well, we're going to have an agency. We're both former in-house marketers. What does this agency look like? We also, for a long time, struggled with our own positioning. And that for us meant that we got to go through this kind of positioning process and this positioning exercise really early on. And so I think seeing how and experiencing how agencies can start as one or two people, then grow into a big organization, not that we're big, without considering positioning was really interesting, because we talked to a lot of agency owners about our product market fit and whether we thought that we would be useful. And so a good example is that, you can often will come across an agency that started off as one person who was really good at one thing, say SEO, right? And then a potential client comes along and says, oh, you do SEO, that's great, we need that, but can you also do graphic design? And, the agency owner can't necessarily turn it down, the work, when they're just starting out. So they'll go out and they'll find a freelancer and that person will do the graphic design. And so things can start to sort of build and build and build. And all of a sudden, kind of 5-10 years down the track, you've got an agency that sells everything, but to no one in particular.
It's tough. It's really hard. And the irony of you making yourselves make the effort to do the eat your own dog food aspect of this is not lost on me, should we say. If you could go back in time and thinking like throughout your whole career, I guess, because you being in-house and wanting to be agency is probably just as important as to how you got here. What piece of advice do you think you'd have given yourself if you'd like popped into existence, say 5 years in the past, and you knew you were kind of going agency direction? What would you say?
I would say don't start an agency in 2023. As much as I kind of joke about like agencies being tough to run and how we shouldn't have done it and all of that kind of stuff, we do really, really love it. And being, two people that are on this kind of what's effectively still a sort of startup journey before moving into a scale-up journey has changed our lives in ways that we both absolutely love. Like when we started, we were like, oh God, we're both crap at sales. What do we do? And we've had to learn to become good at sales, and we've had to learn how to pitch ourselves. We've had to learn how to, do things like go on this podcast and stuff. And so we've learned a lot of really important things. And so I think for me, it's like, if I could give myself that advice, it would just be sort of simple things like make sure you have more money in the bank, make sure that, you're more aware of the kind of global financial situation and how that affects agencies before you start. And also looking at, really knowing and understanding that once you get into an agency, you're going to be deep into an agency and you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and that's okay. Like, don't lie in bed all night every night and beat yourself up over those things, because, these things happen along the way.
And it's good to have a founding partner in an agency, because there's someone to bounce ideas off of, and there's also someone to kind of sense check that reality. I feel like this, but also the reality is that, and you've got some bouncing off of each other there, and the mirrors holding up and things like that. Where else do you look when you need kind of not necessarily advice, but you've got something that you want to? Am I the only one that's going through this kind of thing? Where do you look at that for that sort of stuff?
It's such a good question. When we started, we were really worried about saying to people, we're two guys with a small agency, and pretending that we were this kind of thing that was much bigger and much more experienced and focused than we were, right? Someone that gave us some advice, and they just said, look, if you go in at the level where you sort of seem bigger than you are, then people will take you more seriously as agency owners. And so we did that for the first little while, and it wasn't really working for us. And so being able to go in, being able to change our minds on that and think, you know what, we're just going to own it. We are as good as our skills. And if someone says, oh, you're too small to work with us, well, there's nothing we can do about that.
Yeah.
Right. Having that shift for us meant that we can start finding that help and that support in the startup community. Our ICP isn't the startup community. We don't work with startups and startup agencies, but it doesn't mean that we can't talk to those people and have those kinds of conversations and get that sort of support. And so we've just joined Agency Local, and we're looking at joining a bunch of other sort of networks and events, but we do a lot of outreach and try to have conversations with people who are further on in the journey than us and say, I've made all of these mistakes. Can you tell me which one to not make next?
Yeah, and it's from a sheer point of view of someone who's been there from a building agency's point of view and now helping agencies to grow. I can honestly tell you that everyone has made all of the mistakes, and in future they will all make them all over again unless they help each other, which is exactly what these communities are good for. People always want to sort of share, but I think I saw it. Where did I see it? I think I saw it on Twitter that said, if you want to get an answer to a question really quickly, post the wrong answer on Reddit. And see what happens. That might be another avenue for some knowledge there. So what do you think that, as early doors, lots of things probably change and shift because, you're still settling in, as it were. And what's something that you did like day one that is like a mainstay and probably hopefully will be something that stays current for the whole duration of the agency's life?
We set up a productized service with its own individual brand called Soba Bento, which we got into really around the start of the agency and starting around figuring out what people wanted to do, because I joked before we were recording that I own 3 business books and I've only read one of them.
Yeah.
And this was in the one that I'd read. And it was talking about how agencies need to have productized services and should focus on having 2 to 3 brands. So you have the agency brand, you have the personal brand of the founder, you have the brand of the productized service. We were very late to the game in talking about personal brand and signing up to a personal brand, which we can talk about later if you want. But having that productized service and making sure that it had its own brand and its own thing that could stand on its own 2 feet has been really good for us because it's allowed us to have some ownable IP, show people that we can do the thing that they need in a processed and systemized kind of way, and that they can effectively buy this thing off the shelf that's designed to help with their copy and positioning. And we've worked through it enough to know that, it works. It's built for purpose. It's fit for purpose. And instead of having people come to us and say, oh, we need help with positioning, and then us saying, well, I guess we have a rate card. We just wanted to get that all out of the way right from the start.
Yeah, so people can metaphorically knock on the door and go, one bento, please, and you can wheel it out and deliver the service, I guess. And part of running a digital agency is, understanding that the thing that is being delivered, the service that's being delivered, is often quite invisible. And you very rarely, especially when it comes to what you're offering as well, is obvious from the immediate outset that it's worked. So yeah, you've got your positioning sorted and you've got the copy around it sorted. The website is live and everything where your positioning is shown and is in place, and you've got your pitch ready for when you go to meet people at networking, all that sort of stuff, and you know exactly who you are and what you sell. Still months before you know whether it's any good. So buying some kind of tangible, say, productized thing, or if you're running like long-term strategies in SEO or PPC, having a kind of methodology makes it a heck of a lot easier to not only sell it and it be tangible to the buyer, but also makes it easier for once the buyer has bought to know at what point they are in the journey, and then feel kind of happier throughout that kind of thing. What would you say then if someone does ping you an email or get in touch with you on LinkedIn? How do you know that they're the right fit for you? Is it just, oh Christ, I have no idea what they're trying to sell, they must be a fit? How do you qualify your lead? You said no startup, so presumably that's an immediate qualifier.
Yeah, we have a pretty strict ICP. We work with companies that are between 10 to 12 people that are around the kind of 800 to 900,000 mark. And usually these people also don't have a niche. One of the things we offer with Soba Bento is a niching process. So it's like the second step of the process is you get a niche. So they need to hit those 3 sort of criteria. And then once we know that they've done that, we will get them on a discovery call and talk to them more appropriately and properly about their struggles and make sure that we can actually help. One of the things that we never do is sign up to something we don't think we can fix, because then we just look like dicks, and then they waste money, and no one wants to be that guy, you know?
Well, especially if you're selling something which is only necessarily as good as the last project you did, because referrals and that kind of quiet net marketing is essential. If you can't shout about it and use it in your own marketing, then you have to do a good job, and you have to, it's really easy for agencies to look at the bank balance and go, oh, we could do with another 3 clients, and then 3 terrible opportunities come along and you say yes straight away. I think the balance between taking on lots of business early doors just to make to pay the bills is it's hard to say no sometimes, but you kind of have to when you want to remain honest and true to what can you do, how can you do it, and so on.
And also, I think a lot of our credibility comes from being able to do that. I did a post on LinkedIn a few days ago about how I turned down enough work to mean that we could have both taken the summer off. This guy wanted to white label us to write copy and content for his B2C clients. And we really thought about it, and we thought, damn, this is good. Like this, there's some good scratch in this. But we also realized that we couldn't, on one hand, be saying to all of our prospects, all of our clients, you need to have a niche, you need to have a strong position, you need to be focused, all of these kinds of things. And then quite literally with the other hand, go out and type out, copy and ads for B2C clients, right? We, like you said, we're only as good as sometimes we can only be as good as our next piece of work. Like, I understand where that perception comes from, but we also have to be able to show to people and prove to people that, we do drink our own Kool-Aid.
And you have to. I try my best with OMG to do the same. Had a conversation with someone the other day, and they said, oh, you should try doing this. I'm like, that's literally what we do. What have I done wrong here? And it's a sample size of 1. Hopefully I'm not completely off track, but you do have to, if you're living and breathing something like that, you've got to be willing to adjust if you need to, but do what eat your own dog food, drink your own Kool-Aid, as it were, all day long. Otherwise, no one's going to believe that you know what you're doing. So someone's knocked on your door, metaphorically, hopefully.
Yeah, please don't come to my house.
And they've said, hey, Seb, look, I know it's early days, but you've been around the block a little bit in this industry, so I'm thinking of starting an agency as well. What piece of advice would you give me just before I kick things off?
I think making sure you have enough cash in the bank is a big one. Business is going to be harder to come by than you expect that it's going to be. New business is tough, and it doesn't mean anything until the people have signed the contracts. So also make sure you have watertight contracts. One thing that we learned really recently as well is set up direct debits. And if people are uncomfortable about signing a direct debit for the work that your agency is going to do for them, just say goodbye.
Yeah.
Because those are the people that when your invoice comes out aren't going to pay anyway. So I think those things, know that sales is going to be harder than you expect, have enough cash in the bank, set up direct debits, and have some watertight contracts, because those last 3 things are going to help you not just at the start, but the whole way through building the agency.
Yeah. Absolutely, and it is good advice. Not to shamelessly plug, but to shamelessly plug. There's a few good guides on the OMG Centre website. First of all, how to find the right clients. Second of all, how to get the right clients and get them as easily as possible, and onboard them as quickly as possible. And then, most importantly, if not completely, way more importantly than actually getting them, is how to keep them. So find, get, and keep. There's some really important pieces of content there. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, Seb's advice is great, but how do I start? Well, there's some great content on the OMG Centre website for you to have a look at. Seb, what do you think the future holds for Soba? Since it's early doors, it's really nice to, some agencies I've spoken to have been sort of 10, 15 years in, a few years in. And that vision for them is kind of, they've either realised it or they've changed it 10 times. So what are you looking at 3 to 5 years time? What's your vision?
Complete world domination in our space.
Easy.
I think
totally
is
easy.
we had a really big conversation at the start about, we being Dan and I, about whether we wanted a lifestyle agency or a growth agency. And we both came down on the side of growth agency. And so everything that we're working towards is making sure that the agency grows and grows into a strong and useful business.
Yeah.
We'll always be in the agency to agency space. That's not going to change for us. We have a good niche and some good services that we offer people. So we'll be continually focusing on that and going deeper in that niche and becoming, the people that you come to when you have questions about positioning or copy or, selling your agency, what kind of adverts you should be writing for your agency and that kind of thing. So for us, it's very much like we've got the mission, we've agonized over it already. The next 3 to 5 years are going to be just, honing that mission and vision and keeping building and just keeping plodding along. And I think also reminding ourselves that like there's no such thing as overnight success. There might be several months where we just have to grin and bear it. Yeah. But that's
overnight success takes years.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Seb. It's been great to talk to you.
Thanks so much for having me, man.
And in our next episode, we'll be speaking with another agency leader to hear their story and the lessons they learned along the way. Thanks very much for listening.